Hi, everybody. Welcome to Building Internal Tools with Appsmith and Elasticsearch. We're super excited to welcome Nikhil Nandagopal to our meetup today. Nikhil is a founder and the Chief Product Officer at Appsmith. So without further ado, Nikhil, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Faith. Hey, everyone. It's nice to meet all of you. Today, I'm going to be talking about building internal tools using low code, specifically with Appsmith and Elasticsearch. So I have a small presentation prepared. Let me begin by sharing my screen. Hey, so I'm Nikhil. I'm the founder and head of products at Appsmith, and I've been a developer for the last decade, and I've worked on a couple of internal tools. And today I'm going to be showing you how you can build internal tools with Appsmith and Elasticsearch. But before we begin, what are internal tools? So internal tools are custom pieces of software that businesses typically have to build because they have data in various data sources and they need some kind of interface that their business teams can use in order to analyze data as well as take action upon it. So why do we really need internal tools? Now today we have data in so many different data sources. We have data inside Stripe, which is our payment information. We have data inside Zendesk, which is our support tickets. We have data inside Elasticsearch, which is probably all of our document DB data. And what if we need an interface to actually work with all of this data? That's really where Appsmith comes in. Appsmith allows you to work with all this different data spread across these different data sources by allowing you to create custom UI on top of them, as well as add your own business logic so that you can query this data and update it however you like. Now, why is this so difficult today? This is difficult for a couple of reasons. Most internal tooling today is built by backend engineers, and backend engineers really dislike working with HTML, CSS. They don't really have the front end skills needed to build these tools. And that makes these tools really difficult to build as well as maintain. Most front end engineers want to work on the core consumer facing stuff, and they don't really want to work on internal tools. So these internal tools are typically orphaned or kind of evolve into a state that isn't very maintainable in the long run. And all in all, these internal tools are really critical for the business to scale, but unfortunately, they just don't get the time and attention that they really deserve. So, what are our options today if we want to really build some internal tools? We can either build from scratch. There are great options like React, Node.js, maybe adding a Bootstrap theme. But unfortunately, this would take us a lot of time and require us to invest a lot of knowledge to understand how does front end work, as well as to set up all of these different technologies. And it also becomes quite difficult to maintain in the long run. Our next option is to use something off the shelf. Now, here Kibana has done something really great, especially with Elasticsearch, where it allows you to visualize data. But what if we need to take actions on data? What if we need to update data or send reports or email people? I think that is something that kind of falls slightly outside of the scope of Kibana today. And similarly, we could start with something like Django admin or Forest admin out of the box, but we would only get a quick admin panel up and running. But in the long run, it would be very difficult to still maintain these panels because they're not very customizable. The other option is to try no code. So there have been a lot of new players in the no code space and some old players as well that help you create applications on Google Sheets. But unfortunately, no code has its own set of limitations and eventually we hit a ceiling, especially when dealing with large data sets. So no code typically doesn't allow us to work with different data sources the way we need to in the case of Elastic as well as it doesn't allow us to really have the level of customizability that we need with these type of tools. So our other option is to go low code. And today I'm going to be talking about Appsmith. So Appsmith is a open source low code platform for developers to build internal tools. Appsmith makes it really easy for developers to spin up these tools because it gives you all the building blocks out of the box and allows you to assemble them the way that you want. You can even write code to customize your applications the way that suits your business needs. So how does it work? Appsmith has two different layers. The first is the IDE. So the IDE is the environment in which developers can code and build applications. And this IDE consists of three sections. One, it consists of a UI builder that gives you all the components and building blocks out of the box. So you can simply drag and drop these components and configure them the way you'd like without needing to know HTML or CSS. The second is our query interface. You can query data from your Elastic database, from any REST API, from any database pretty much out there, right inside your browser. You can even connect to pretty much any REST endpoint. So the query interface allows you to interface with different data sources that are there. The third is the JavaScript section. So in Appsmith, you can write JavaScript anywhere in the IDE. This means that you can use JavaScript to connect your UI to your queries with just a little bit of code. And that allows you the customizability and flexibility to build any kind of application that you really need. The second layer of Appsmith is the platform layer. So in the platform layer, we have access controls, one-click deployment, and collaboration all baked in. This means that your applications are secure by default. You can invite users with varying roles to your applications. You can deploy your application with the click of a button, and also you can collaborate with your team. You can even sync your applications to GitHub and raise pull requests, perform code reviews, integrate with your CI/CD, and make these applications a core part of your workflow. So Appsmith was built with developers in mind and developer workflows in mind to ensure that it could sit directly inside your internal stack. And I'm going to be talking about how you can leverage Appsmith and Elastic to build some really great internal tools. Today, we're going to be talking about the customer support tool. So typically, we see that Elastic is used with a lot of large data. E-commerce companies use Elasticsearch to maintain all of their order information and product catalog information, and it makes it really easy to deal with this data. But what if you're a customer support agent that needs to now act upon this data? So that's where Appsmith or custom tooling comes in, where you need a simple tool that will allow you to go ahead and search through this data for the right customer who's raising a ticket for maybe a faulty product. You need to be able to go and analyze the customer correctly. You need to be able to update some information about the customer. You may need to even refund or mark their order as returned. And you may also need to update some of the product catalog information. Now, all of this is only possible with custom internal software, and we're going to show you how you can quickly build that with Appsmith today. So the tool we're going to be building is a customer support tool, and we're going to be talking to Elastic, which has all of our e-commerce data. It has data around orders, along with the user information, and along with the product information of those orders. Now, Elastic isn't the best use case to store images. So we typically store images in a separate data source, which is like Amazon S3, and we only store the URLs in Elastic so that they can be easily queryable. This is a really great use case where you need a custom internal tool that can talk to both these data sources to serve your need. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of what's possible, and we're going to be building a tool very similar to this. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through the tool. So this is a live tool that I've actually built on Appsmith, and it allows you to go ahead and search through all of your user information. Now, Elastic has information in a document DB kind of structure, but that information is not necessarily the best for business teams to be able to query and look through. So business teams need a simple way to be able to search their user information. So we've displayed all of the users here. And even though Elastic has millions of records in it, we can easily handle that in the application because we've enabled server-side pagination. So it's really easy to deal even with infinite data sets. And not only that, we can also search for users correctly. So over here, we've enabled server-side search as well by directly talking to Elastic. So here I'm going to search for George, and you can see all the Georges kind of show up inside our dashboard. And not only that, we can also drill down and look at their different order histories and information. For example, we can see the statistics of the type of products that they buy, as well as their orders over here. And we're only looking at relevant information to George right now that is selected in this table above. So this is really handy for business teams to actually build. The other thing we can do is also mark certain orders as refunded or returned. And we can see that as we mark them, it has been automatically updated inside the database. So this is a typical really great use case for Appsmith where you need to write back information after you've extracted some information from the system. Another great use case is that we can see all of the products purchased over here, but we can see that they don't have certain information correct. So for example, maybe we can see that there is no image for this particular product. So we can go ahead and select an image from our local store. Let's select this jacket and upload it. And right now, this image has been uploaded to S3. And we can also update the product. Maybe the product information is incorrect. And instead of a jeans, maybe it's a green jacket. And maybe this user's order information itself is incorrect. And instead of one quantity, they actually wanted two. So we can easily go ahead and double that over here and update this information. And just like that, we can see that the image has now been updated to S3 as well as inside Elasticsearch, and along with all the other product information related to the user's order. And that's a really handy use case for a lot of e-commerce teams. Now, a tool like this would typically take weeks of engineering effort, and it's not the best use of all of your engineering time because most of your engineers won't focus on the consumer-facing parts of your product. But with Appsmith, you can quickly build up tools like this in just a couple of hours. And I'm going to show you how you can do that. So this is the entire Appsmith interface where you have multiple organizations and applications. And this is the application that we just saw. So to create a new application is really easy. You can just hit just new. And instantly you will get an out-of-the-box application created for you. Now, in order to work with Elastic, the first thing we need to do is go ahead and add a new data source. So Appsmith allows you to talk to multiple data sources, including Elasticsearch, and you can simply click on the data source here to create it. So you can call this CBD. And we just need to fill in the host URL port and the authentication details in order to connect to our database. So in order to get this information, all you need to do is go inside your Elastic console and navigate to the deployment section over here. And under the deployments, you'll see that there's an endpoint setting. So you need to copy this endpoint setting into Appsmith, into the host URL, and copy the port into the separate field. You also have your own authentication credentials, which you can then go ahead and save over here. And after saving your database, it'll show up directly inside your application. Now you can easily create queries on top of this data source once it's been authenticated with Elastic. The most important thing in Appsmith is that we ensure that all of your credentials are encrypted and stored safely on the server. So no queries go out from the browser directly. So all of your data is always secure and none of it is ever stored on our servers. So I already have connected to the e-commerce database. So I'm just going to go and use that right now. And the first thing we want to do is to be able to query for all the users inside the data store. So let's go ahead and create a new query. We can call this query fetch users. And as you can see, I'm going to show you how the edit mode of our current application looks. So here what we've done is we've simply taken the index from Elastic and added a search path. So with Appsmith, you can talk to all of Elastic's REST APIs directly. So it has all of the APIs documented over here inside their documentation. And all of these APIs work out of the box. You can just simply copy paste them with the method, the path, as well as the body that you want to send. And all of these queries will run inside Appsmith. So right now, I'm just going to use the index and search query. And I'm also going to copy the body to fetch users. Right now, for from, I'm just going to simply start from the 0th record. And I'm going to add a limit of maybe 10 records. I've also added a filter to only return records that actually have an email because I only want verified accounts. And I'm also aggregating this and using a distinct query on top of it to ensure that because Elastic contains all of the users' order data, I only want the unique users from it. So if I queried everything, I'd get a lot of duplicate users. So aggregation allows me to do that. Hitting run here will allow me to fetch all of this data from Elastic. And I can see that this data has been returned over here with all of these different records. Now we just need to create our UI. So now that we fetched the data from the database, we can use a table widget by easily dragging and dropping it on the screen and connecting it to our data. So we named our query fetch users. So we can say fetch users.data. But right now we can see that it doesn't evaluate a type of array of object. So Appsmith also intelligently handles errors because we know that Elastic is right now not returning the exact data format that we need. But we can also see that the right data that we need is underneath the hits key, and underneath that, we can see that all of this data is there. So we can use JavaScript to access it correctly. We can just say .hits, and instantly we can see all of the data from our database being shown over here. So that's really handy. The next thing that we probably want to do is format this data, because since Elastic works with a lot of nested documents, we want to flatten this out so that it's easily representable inside a table. To do this, we can go ahead and create a new JavaScript object. So over here, we can create a new JavaScript object and name it maybe the product DAO. And inside here, we can create a simple transformation function that will help us actually flatten out the data. So let's call this function fetch users.
Hey, Nikhil, there's a question in the chat. Somebody is asking if Appsmith is HIPAA compliant.
Yeah, so the best part about Appsmith is that it's open source. So you can take it and actually self-host it inside your own firewalls and ensure that none of the data ever leaves. So our cloud version is not HIPAA compliant, but we do recommend just self-hosting Appsmith, and that makes it really easy to deal with the healthcare data and other sensitive data. Awesome. Is there another question, Faith?
Nope, not right now.
All right. So to flatten this data, we can first have a look at our fetch users data data source from the query, and we can add a map over the hit section. We can use a mapper function in JavaScript. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to return a set of values that we really need. So we don't need all of the keys from the document. We only need specific ones that are really important to us. So let's call this the user flow. And here, I think one of the most important ones is the email. So we're going to take the user.source.email. And as you can see in Appsmith, we have an autocomplete that's really handy and helps you write code while you're interacting with the platform. Also, if you're ever in an error state, the platform will automatically tell you that you are in that error state and give you some feedback about your syntax. So it works just like a normal IDE. And similarly, some other information that we probably need is maybe the name. So we can take it from the user.source, and I think it's the customer phone name. Yeah. With just this, we can now see that our nested document has now been flattened, and it's now easy to be consumed inside the table. So once we head back to the table, we can now connect this to our JS object. So let's talk to the product object and hit fetch users. And just like that, we can see all of our document data really in a nice, smooth, clean view. So this is really convenient for business users who aren't really used to querying data in a very nested structure. They generally like a flat relational structure for data, and that's how we can go ahead and implement something like this. I think the next part of the problem is being able to now fetch the relevant orders for this particular user, right? So we can go ahead and create a new API. So let's call that let's go ahead and create a new query called fetch orders. And similarly, over here, we've used the search API again, but we added a slight difference to the query. So I'll just add search here to the path. But in the query, what we've done is we're actually using JavaScript inside our query as well. So this is really new because what we're able to do now is make our queries dynamic. So till now, we had only fetched a static set of data. But now, instead of hard coding the email over here, I'm choosing to fetch the email from the table selected row and from its email field. So now, only from depending on which user is actually selected over here, their orders are going to be fetched. And we can make sure that the right user is being selected because we constantly evaluate things in Appsmith. So here in the evaluated value, you'll be able to inspect exactly the query that's going out to ensure that you never make a mistake while querying your data. So here, I'm going to quickly run the query. So that was Let me have a look. This, oh, there is no slash here. Let me see, what did I miss? Let me try creating a new query from our data source. Oh, there we go. So now we're able to actually fetch the exact orders for this particular user. And we can verify that it's from this particular user by seeing the email over here. And it directly maps to the email that we're actually sending into the query. So just like that, we're easily able to query relational data inside the nested documents as well. And displaying this data again is really easy. So Appsmith comes with a complete set of pre-built widgets. We have over 40 widgets that allow you to configure your UI in a way that's really easy for you. And catching a widget onto the screen is as simple as dragging and dropping it from the left side. You can then get access to the widget's property pane over here, where you can configure its various properties that suit your needs. So here, once again, I'm going to configure this to talk to our fetch orders query. And this needs to talk to the hits.hits key as well. And we can go ahead and see all of the order information here as well. And now we probably also need to format this order information because again, it's extremely nested and we need to flatten it out. So this is kind of how you can go about doing various operations inside Appsmith on top of your data very quickly. Now, I'm also going to talk about how do you kind of go about creating some of the CRUD interfaces. So this was really great to kind of visualize your data, but you also need a way to edit and update your information. So in order to do that, we're going to add a small button to our orders table, and we're going to be able to mark different orders as returned or not returned, and even add logic to disable this button based on various conditions. So before we do that, let's start by first flattening our orders data as well. So I'm just going to copy over this JavaScript. And yeah, we support most of the IDE shortcuts as well. So you can very quickly navigate through all the entities inside your editor. And here, what I'm doing with this JavaScript function is I'm simply mapping over it and extracting only the keys that are really important to me. I can also just check the actual value of this over here before going ahead and adding it to my table. And with that, we're able to see all of our order information inside our table. Now we can go and customize our table as well. For example, we can add a new custom column, call an action. And columns can be configured in a variety of ways. We can change their column type. So for today, I want a button instead of a text. And we can change the label of the button to be mark refund or mark return. We can also style the color of the button. And what we can also do on top of this is we can dynamically change different values. So the unique thing about Appsmith is that you can write code wherever you want. So if an order is already returned, we don't want to allow users to go ahead and return it again. So we can change the disability property and make it dynamic. So converting it to JS gives us an input field, which we can then use to write logic such as the current row dot, let's say, the current row dot status is equal to returned, then it should be disabled. And similarly, if it was not, then we'd see that all of these buttons would instantly get disabled. And that's the really nice thing about Appsmith is that it's a real-time editor. So you don't need to rely on hot reloading because the entire editor is constantly live. So every single edit you make, you can instantly get feedback on it inside.
Hey, Nikhil, there's a question from Sanjay.
Yeah.
They ask, can we have a pivot view with any related widget?
Right. So right now, I think a pivot table is one of the widgets that we currently have in our roadmap. We haven't built it out yet, but we always accepting contribution that we always like adding new widgets. So I'm sure that will be soon very quickly. That'll be possible very quickly.
And they also ask, can we have an alert based on a condition?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it depends on what type of alert you're talking about. For example, let's say that on the click of this button, we want to define that we need to execute the fetch users query. We could then say that if it succeeds, we should maybe go ahead and show an alert saying um, success or fetched users. But if it failed, we could go ahead and mark it. We can go ahead and maybe take another action, such as opening a modal, navigating a user. We can even download data, or we could just simply show another error message saying that fetching failed. Yeah. And this makes it really easy inside Appsmith to create logic because anytime you want to break the bounds of the simple UI editor, you can go ahead and write JavaScript in this entire editor. So you can create a custom function to do many things. You could maybe have a show notification function. And then based on various conditions, such as if maybe your fetch users dot data dot its dot length is greater than some number, you want to maybe take a particular action, such as maybe you want to call orders, or you want to take another action. So you can pretty much write code to wire up your logic any way you like. You can call any function inside Appsmith, and you can construct your business logic the way that suits your needs. I hope I answered your question. All right. So back to marking something as refunded. So now once we have this custom action inside the table, we want to configure the on click of this action. So just like the normal button, this button as well has an on click property that can be configured. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another query on top of Elastic. So we're going to go ahead and create a update query this time, and we're going to call it return order. And we're going to, I think the return order API is a post API. So we're just going to copy this over again. And here, instead of the path being static, we're actually reading the ID of the table, of the selected row inside the table to ensure that only the order that is selected inside the UI is actually returned. So this again allows us to write dynamic queries along with the JavaScript so that all of our data only resides, only gets updated from what the user is selecting. And over here, I'm just going to add a simple block body to say that mark status as returned whenever this query is run. So this return order query is basically going to update the database for this particular selected row ID, and it's going to mark the status as returned. And once we do this, we probably want to also fetch the orders back. So let's do that. So now inside our action, we can go ahead and configure that. Let's say that on click, you want to execute a query, we want to execute the return order, and on success, we can go ahead and fetch orders again. So this will allow us to actually select a particular row over here and then go ahead and mark it as returned. Yeah, so that actually marked that particular row as returned, and it's currently not being returned by the data store once it gets marked. So this is kind of how you can create various CRUD views, and I'm going to show you how you can kind of also integrate with S3. So another query I'm going to create is on top of AWS S3. We're going to call this the upload file, and this is going to be used whenever we want to upload an image to our S3 storage and then link that image to our database. So right now, I'm going to just copy some of these fields over, such as the bucket name, The method should be create new file. So there are different methods that you can use. You can either fetch all the files in a bucket, or you can go ahead and create a new file, or you can delete a file or delete multiple files. So all of this is possible. And right now I'm going to configure it to create a new file. The file path that I'll use is going to be, I'm going to take it from the order ID. So I'm going to use table to's selected row and pick it from its order field. We can also configure the duration of the signed URL. So I'm just going to keep this as 50 minutes for now. And the content, so the content of this file, we need to pick it from somewhere. And to do that, we can go ahead and make use of file picker. So this file picker allows us to configure different options so that users can go ahead and select the files from their local device and upload those to their own S3 bucket. So here on file selected, we're going to execute a query which is upload file. And we can have various configurations for the different types of files that we need to upload, as well as the different formats we want to upload it in, and even add restrictions on the number of files in the file size. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and select the jacket again. And what we'll do before actually uploading it is we'll configure the content. So the content, again, you can use JavaScript to configure the content. We can pick it from the file picker. So the file picker one is the default name given to the file picker, and it has many properties inside of it. So it has like the file property. And because the file is an array, we only want the first file. So I'm just going to pick the file with 0. And this will ensure that I'm picking the first file from the file picker and sending that to the S3 backend. And just hitting run here. We can see that the file got uploaded successfully, and we can even check out the signed URL. Now to look at the signed URL, we can go ahead and use an image widget. Dragging an image widget on the screen over here. We can now connect this image widget to the actual file that got uploaded. So we can connect it to the upload file API and talk to its data field and its signed URL field. This, okay, sorry, this did not get uploaded correctly. Ideally, once this gets uploaded, you'll be able to directly read all of your files inside this particular widget. And then you can use that to actually verify the images, as well as now go ahead and update that image inside the Elasticsearch document as well. So we can see that we've implemented that over here inside this list widget. So the list widget is a special widget that works slightly different from the table. It allows you to have other widgets inside of it, and it also repeats these widgets. So that means that if you have an array of data, you can go ahead and create repeatable views of that data. So for example, over here inside this list widget, I've actually created an array of products that's been fetched from the database, and this is being displayed inside this list. But I'm also able to customize every individual element of this particular array. For example, if I feel that, so right now I'm actually showing only the current item price, but maybe I also want to show the tax price. So what I can do is I can simply drag a new widget and place that over here. I can also maybe create a little bit more space. And inside this new widget, we can go ahead and access the current item and access the base price. We can access the minimum price, and yeah, we can also access the taxable price. So just like this, we can create extremely rich, complex UI as well as interaction inside Appsmith, because you have complete access to different atomic widgets as well as composable widgets that you can use JavaScript to then wire up together in any way that you'd like. Another example is this button widget that is only has an icon. We've used it to open up a modal. So every time you click on this button, the show modal action gets triggered, and that goes ahead and opens up this modal over here. And in this modal, we've used various widgets such as the text widget, the input widget, and we've added, as well as the file picker. And what we've done is that we've also added a bit of validation to ensure that none of these fields can be empty, preventing the user from making a mistake. So an example of this is that maybe we want to ensure that the button gets disabled every single time the input of every time the input of quantity is not available. So we can add a simple JavaScript check for that. We can say if the quantity input dot is valid, if it's not valid, then just go ahead and kind of disable this. And we can then mark the quantity input as a required field over here. So this will kind of ensure that whenever the quantity input is has a particular value, that it is kind of enabled, and if it doesn't have that value, it kind of gets disabled over here. Yeah. So this ensures that it gets disabled every single time that the quantity doesn't have a value, and every time we kind of go ahead and update the quantity with a value that makes sense, then we'll actually see this kind of go ahead and get enabled. And over here, we can also look at the file picker and go ahead and pick files from the local storage, and that will then upload it to S3 and update the database. So what we've done is that on update, we've gone ahead and created a function called update product. Enter the product now. And what the update product function does is it goes ahead and first updates the product with the new information, which is the new image information. It then shows an alert. It then fetches the new orders and closes the widget, the modal widget, and resets all of its fields. And the unique thing that you'll notice over here is that we're using async and await, which is a very popular JavaScript construct. So this helps you deal with multiple queries that are running both in parallel, as well as if you want to run them in serial, you can go ahead and do that as well. So async and await gives you complete control in the of the order of execution of your queries. And yeah, that's it. With the click of a button, you can actually deploy your application. And these applications can now be accessed through through the browser URL from the outside world. But by default, all applications are authenticated and safe. So to share this application, you have to hit share and go ahead and invite somebody to your application. Till then, they will not get access to it. Or you can also make your applications public to give people access to it. And Appsmith ships with also other really interesting features, such as the real-time commenting feature. So you can leave comments anywhere on your widgets, saying things like, "Hey, can I also see the maybe the gender field of every user?" And then other people from your team can get notified. You can tag them, and they can come in here and resolve these comments. And the best part about Appsmith is that you can go ahead and just directly connect it to your Git repository. It will automatically sync all of the commits every time you try to deploy. And you can then integrate it with your core development workflows by raising pull requests, going through code reviews, and deploying your application through your CI/CD. So all of this works out of the box, and it perfectly integrates with your development workflow. Awesome. That's pretty much all I had today. Faith, are there any other questions that I can answer?
I don't see any right now, but thank you so much, Nikhil. This was a really great presentation, and we appreciate you coming on the meetup and telling us all about Appsmith. So thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Faith.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.